about your high school a sense for, okay, what type of school is this? Is this a rural school? Is this an urban school? Is this a highly competitive school? Does it not matter? I mean, is there not much competition? And they will come to certain conclusions based on the profile. The profile has nothing to do with the students. The school develops it every year, and it is just automatically attached with every application and sent out. So that's the school's to do, right? That's the first piece. Second piece is your transcript, the high school transcript. So that, again, is the school's responsibility. But like I said, there's usually something that you as the student have to do to request that transcript so that the college knows that, okay, I need to send it out to Emory for the student. So you have to keep that in mind. There's something called the school report. That is the counselor's responsibility, and the school report is usually required for all Common App schools. So the school report will usually ask the counselor to complete, like we have to complete a rating sheet, we have to rate the student on so many criteria, we have to list the rank, just what is the GPA, things like that. It's very straightforward stuff, but that again is the counselor's to do. The SAT, ACT scores, we talked about that, that's the students to do. And then the last piece is the letter of recommendation. Letters of recommendation are usually required, not always, by colleges, and there are two types of letters of recommendation that you can submit. The counselor recommendation it falls into a separate category from the teacher letter of recommendation. So the counselor recommendation is something that if a college requires it, you have to submit it. And you need to connect with your counselor and make sure your counselor writes you the letter. Now every counselor is going to have a different way of drafting up that letter. If you go to a private school and maybe your counselor has only 25 or 30 seniors at a time on his or her caseload, they might know you intimately. They might really not need any more information. They might say, okay, I know the student, I got it. At our high school, I have on average about 100 seniors on my caseload, and while I try to get to know them pretty well, over the course of 4 years, sometimes I don't, and sometimes I don't know what they do. So I require all my seniors to complete a survey. It's something all my juniors complain about ad nauseum because it's 26 questions. It makes them dig deep and figure out who they are. It's very personal, but it's good practice. But I use that material to write my letters of recommendation. And then there's the teacher letter of recommendation. Now, each letter of recommendation serves a different purpose. Now, when a college receives a letter of recommendation from the counselor letter of recommendation always talks about the student. Like I always talk about the student and who they are as a human being. I'm not listing activities, I'm not talking about how great a leader you are. I mean, I might, but in a different way. I'm really addressing who you are as a human being. What can I tell a college admissions officer that will tell them that this student is going to succeed in college? Or maybe not. I mean, they're a horrible student and they've been nothing but rude to me. It's kind of hard for me to dig deep and say good things. Never had that experience, but just saying, right? So that's what a counselor rec letter is supposed to do. The teacher rec letter is really supposed to talk about you and what kind of student you were in that teacher's class. So when you pick a teacher to write a letter of recommendation for you, don't always go to the teacher whose class you got an A in. Sometimes that doesn't really do you any good. So maybe you have a teacher whose class you really struggled in the beginning. I mean, that class really kicked your backside and made you work the hardest you've ever worked. But if you started and you struggled, but then you kind of turned things around halfway through the semester and you finished out really strong, that's the kind of teacher you want to get a letter of recommendation from. Because if that teacher knows how hard you worked and the fact that you came before or after school for help, you worked, you came and looked at every test and you figured out what you did wrong, like you really made those adjustments, that teacher is going to have a lot more to say about you than if you just kind of cruised through that class and got an A, right? So that's what the teacher rec letter is supposed to do. Now, as far as what colleges need, it could be any combination of anything. Sometimes, if you're applying to an engineering program, most colleges will say you need a rec letter from a math and a science teacher. That's pretty standard, right? If you're not applying to an engineering program and you're applying to a liberal arts school, colleges might say, you know what, I just need two rec letters. It doesn't matter who it's from. So I've had students who've sometimes got a letter from their band teacher. Because that was something they really excelled in. They had musical talent, they worked really hard, whatever it is, right? But how you know what you need to submit is from the college's website. When you look at the undergraduate admissions page, they'll tell you very clearly what they need. So,
just one question.
Yes.
There are two aspects. One is school's responsibility and student's responsibility. For each application, for each college, will the school send directly or we have to collect those documents?
I will say not automatically, because there's usually a process you need to follow at the school. So I'll give you an example at our school, right? On average, like my 100 seniors will submit about 800 to 1,000 applications throughout any application cycle. Now, my students, like my senior, might list 10 colleges on their list, but I don't know if they're serious about those colleges or not. So the way I know that they're absolutely serious is they have to request a transcript. And the way it works for us is when they request a transcript and they pay for the transcript, then all these other pieces follow the transcript automatically. That's our process. Every high school has its own process, and usually by the time you get to senior year, they will let the students know. Requesting a transcript is pretty standard at any high school. Like you actually have to complete a form and you have to do things. And usually counselors will use that transcript request to say, okay, now that the student has requested a transcript, I also need to submit the school profile and my letter of recommendation and anything else with the school. But there's usually an internal process for each high school. Yeah. And please feel free to stop me at any point. Just talking, yes.
Would you like to have like question and answer session at the end, or would you
No,
like
actually,
them to
I would prefer if you
interact?
jumped in. Yeah, it makes more sense if you ask me questions as I'm talking about it. So yeah, please feel free to stop me at any time. So with letters of recommendation, one good thing to do is that, I know most students will request letters of recommendation of their teachers in senior year. I actually think it's a better time to request letters of recommendation from your teacher in the second semester of your junior year, and here's why. In senior year, all the teachers are kind of drowning writing rec letters, right? If you have a teacher who you already know by the second semester of junior year, give them a heads up and say, I would really like a letter of recommendation from you. Would you mind writing it now? So if you're on a block schedule and you have a teacher second semester and you know you have a really good rapport, that teacher knows you really well, talk to them then. They're much better off writing that rec letter in the second semester and setting it aside. That way they don't have to worry about it in senior year. But generally, colleges look for letters of recommendation from teachers, and generally it's junior or senior year teachers. They don't want to hear from your freshman or sophomore year, 9th or 10th grade teachers, because, if you look at so many freshmen, they look nothing like what they looked like in 9th grade by the time they get to 11th grade, right? So as a student, you're not doing yourself any justice if you ask for a letter of recommendation from a freshman teacher. So that's just something to keep in mind.
One more comment, promise. When you say the school report has to be given, like if he has to apply in October, right, for the application. So his GPA till that would be taken into consideration.
That's a good question.
What happens after if he comes up later?
So that's actually a good question. So whenever students submit applications, whether you're applying regular decision in January or you're applying early action in October, the transcript that gets submitted to the colleges will only include the first 3 years of high school. It'll only include 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. It won't include anything in senior year. And that's standard across the board. Now, the way that colleges will see your senior year grades, they will never see second semester senior year grades, like that's the spring semester from January through May. They won't see that until the very end. But the way they see first semester grades is there's something called a mid-year report. So if a student has applied to any school and if they have not heard back from that college by December, I make it standard practice for my seniors to request a mid-year transcript because we are on a block, right? So the first semester grades get finalized by December. And if you took some hard classes and you did really well in that, you want the colleges to see that information. So the way you get it to them is through what we call a mid-year transcript. So that usually includes the first semester of senior year. And that's what you want to send to them.
Yeah, but now what you say is the 9th, 10th and 11th.
Yeah.
This is a special case.
Yeah, and you know what, for him I would say you really need to connect with your counselor and make sure that when the counselor writes your letter of recommendation, she's addressing your situation and making it known that you weren't your average kid who came into 9th grade, right? She has to put that in perspective. Because they'll take that into consideration. And they look at his trajectory and how well he's done since he came here. Yeah. So, yes.
Okay, so when you say block scheduling is different in Florida. So what do you mean when you reference that?
When I say block scheduling, I mean you take 4 classes in the fall, you start in August, you finish in December, and then you take 4 different classes in the spring, you start in January, finish in May.
Okay, so.
You guys maybe have like a mixed schedule, like some blocks, some year-long?
Like right now, I take 8 classes year round,
Okay,
and it's 90 minutes each day, four each day, 4 on the other day.
oh my God, you have A and B days.
Yeah,
I don't know
A and
how
B
you
days,
guys
it's
make it
crazy.
from day to day. Yeah, that, oh my God, that's really confusing. So, so I guess for you, it would pretty much be a traditional schedule because you're not completing the year's worth of curriculum in 4 months, like January, August through December or January through May. It is pretty much stretched out over the year, right?
Yeah.
But it's not where you have 8 classes every single day. You have 4 a day, but you're alternating them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at our school, we call them skinnies, where, you know, it's a year-round class, but you go to your class every other day, which is kind of what you're doing, right? So if I was a student, for example, then I took, if I took band and I took English, then band and English for us skinnies, which means that band and English both fall in second block. But I go to band one day, I go to English one day, but I do that all year.
Oh, okay.
So, but I'm thinking it might not be the same thing, but it's kind of similar. So you'll do 4 classes one day, 4 different classes the other.
Yeah, and then it just keeps alternating year
Yes.
round.
Right. So you, for all practical purposes, are on what we call a traditional schedule because it is a year-round curriculum.
Right, thank you.
So, any questions about letters of recommendation? Oh, I have one bullet point on here which I really didn't touch upon. I say try to tie it into the major you're applying to. So, like I said, if you're applying to an engineering program, you definitely want to get a letter of recommendation from a math or a science teacher. Yes?
Next year, my school is actually changing from traditional to block. So like in the middle, so 9th and 10th is traditional, and then 11th and 12th is going to be block. So how will that affect like the way the admissions counselors would like to look?
Are you in an IB program?
No.
No. What about you? That's interesting. I haven't heard that. I'll say this. One reason schools are on a block schedule is because they can pack in a lot more, right? So if you look at Cobb County, all the magnet programs are on a block schedule because students who attend a school which is on a block schedule, they take 32 classes over the course of 4 years. If you're on a traditional schedule, those students will only take 24. So they're making certain assumptions about kids who are on a block schedule, and the assumptions are what I talked about earlier. If you are thriving in a class and you're on a block schedule, they're telling themselves, okay, this student is accelerated, they can handle the pace of curriculum even though it's really fast, especially if it's an AP and you're taking it in one semester. They're jumping to some conclusions about who you are as a student. So I think if you tend to do well on a block schedule, it plays in your favor because it means that you can handle fast-paced instruction, right? I mean, they never hold it against a student because at the end of the day, I mean, the way the system works in the US is you go to the high school that you're districted for, right? But generally, block helps. But that's something I'm sure they detail in the school profile and they take that into consideration. Did I see a hand up? Yes.
So I'm taking a hyper-accelerated math course with the same teacher for 4 years.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, tell me what you're
So-
doing. You said you were in 10th grade, right?
Yeah.
So what are you doing right now?
AP Calc 8.
Okay, wow, okay. I know. That's awesome. Okay, so but what do you mean by with the same teacher? It's the same teacher teaches you
It's
for
the
4
same
years?
teachers that teaches us for 4 years.
Okay, so what do you finish out with right now?
We finish with we took 2 classes last year. We took Algebra 2 and Geometry B and Accelerated Pre-Calculus last year in 2 semesters.
Oh my God.
And we're doing
Okay.
the same thing senior year with multivariable and engineering. But
Okay,
I might opt to take Georgia Tech Calculus instead.
yeah.
So how would that process work?
With respect to what, Hannah?
Like if I wanted to take Georgia Tech Calculus.
So math is generally sequential, which means it's not like social studies or English. You can't just jump around the place, right? You have to move up a certain sequence. So my understanding of the way the sequence works is it's generally geometry, algebra 2, pre-calc, then AP Calc AB, BC, and then either linear algebra, multivariable calc. I mean, for us, our kids take Georgia Tech Calc 2 and 3 beyond AP Calc BC. So if you're applying to a school like Georgia Tech, for example, if it's on your list, I'm pretty sure you're on a very different track, but Georgia Tech generally wants to see that the student has taken the highest level of math available at their school. Okay? And I say at your school because college admissions is not a set formula across the country. Every student is evaluated within the context of their high school. It's very different. So the context of your high school might be very different from a traditional high school here. So again, like what you take, I think should be a function of your interest. So if you're looking at engineering schools, which it sounds like you might be, the calculus is going to be really important for you. So I would like to see you take Georgia Tech Cap 2 and 3, and 3 is usually multivariable cap, 2 is linear algebra. So if you have that track, you're generally in a good place if you're getting into an engineering program. Yeah. Was that the question? Did I answer that question? I thought I saw a hand somewhere else.